Okay, just picture this for a second. You're hundreds of kilometers from any kind of safety, your supplies are pretty much gone, your friends are dead, and the temperature is just cratering. What do you do? I mean, what can you do? This isn't just some thought experiment. It's the exact question one man had to answer for real.
And this is the face of the man who found an answer. This is Sir Douglas Mawson, and this photo was taken right after he finished one of the most insane journeys of survival you'll ever hear about. I mean, just look at him. The sunken eyes, the gaunt face. It tells you everything you need to know about the unbelievable hardship he just went through.
But here's the thing about Mawson. He wasn't just a survivor. He was also a brilliant scientist. And if you really want to understand how he managed to live, you've got to understand both parts of this incredible person, the unstoppable explorer and the incredibly dedicated academic.
So, our story really kicks off during what they call the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Mawson's leading this big Australian expedition. It's all about science and discovery. But from one small group, the Far Eastern Party, that mission was about to turn into an absolutely desperate fight just to stay alive.
They're way out there, nearly 500 kilometers from their main base, mapping brand new territory. Everything's going great for Mawson and his two partners, Belgrave Ninnis and Xavier Mertz. And then the ice just opens up beneath them. In an instant, Ninnis, the sled with most of their food, their tent, their best dogs, all of it, gone. Plunged into a bottomless crevasse, never to be seen again.
So now it's just Mawson and Mertz, and they're left with next to nothing. Trying to get back to base from that position, it was basically a death sentence. So to understand the kind of person who could even look at those odds and decide to fight, we've got to rewind a little bit. Because before Mawson's world was all about ice, it was actually all about stone.
Yep, long before Antarctica made him famous, Douglas Mawson was a total rising star in geology. He was fascinated by the deep history of our planet and was always looking for the next big discovery.
And this slide really shows you the two sides of his life. On the one hand, you've got the distinguished University of Adelaide, the formal lecture halls where he was this respected academic. But on the other hand, you've got the rugged Australian outback. That was his real laboratory, where he'd hike for miles studying some of the oldest rocks on Earth.
And make no mistake, his scientific credentials were rock solid. He had degrees in both mining engineering and science. He was an expert on radioactive minerals. He even discovered and named one called Davidite. And here's the key part. It was his work studying ancient glacial rocks in Australia that first lit the fire in him to go see the massive, active glaciers of Antarctica for himself.
He got his first shot at the Great White Continent on Ernest Shackleton's legendary Nimrod expedition. And boy, did he make an impact. He was part of the first team ever to climb Mount Erebus, Antarctica's most active volcano. And, as you see right here, he was on the first team to reach the South Magnetic Pole. This guy was no amateur. He was the real deal.
All right, so let's jump back to that desolate sheet of ice in 1912. Mawson wasn't just fighting for his life with raw grit. He was fighting with the sharp, analytical mind of a scientist and the hard-won experience of an explorer. And trust me, he was going to need every single bit of it.
This was it. This was the moment, the exact second that everything just changed. With Ninnis gone, the odds of survival for Mawson and Mertz plummeted to pretty much zero.
The journey home was just one unfolding tragedy after another. With no real food, they had to eat their remaining sled dogs to survive. But tragically, husky liver has toxic levels of vitamin A. Mertz got incredibly sick, he became delirious, and he eventually died. That left Mawson completely, utterly alone, still 160 kilometers from base, and suffering from the exact same poisoning.
What he did next is, well, it's almost unbelievable. Sick, starving, with the skin literally peeling off the soles of his feet, he just refused to die. He took a pocket tool and sawed his own sledge in half to make it light enough for one man to pull, loaded on the bare minimum, and just kept walking. And that thing you're looking at? That's not a museum replica. That is the actual sledge he dragged across the ice.
So after a solid month of this private hell, he finally sees it on the horizon, the outlines of his base camp. He actually made it. But in the cruelest twist of fate you can imagine, the ship that was sent to rescue them, the Aurora, had just sailed away. They'd left only a few hours earlier. Mawson had to stay and spend another entire year in Antarctica. But you know what? That unbelievable ordeal, it didn't break him, it forged him. When he finally got back to Australia, he was treated like a national hero. But for Mawson,
His work as both an explorer and a scientist was really just getting started.
I mean, look at this career path. He's knighted by the king. He writes his incredible book, The Home of the Blizzard. He becomes a full professor, shaping the minds of generations of geologists. And then, and this is what's so amazing, he goes back. He leads another huge expedition, using ships and planes this time to survey the coast. And that work is what eventually led to Australia claiming 42% of the entire continent.
And here he is during that second trip. He's no longer the desperate survivor. He's a confident leader, a statesman of science, right back in his element, continuing his life's work in the very place that nearly killed him.
So when you really step back and look at the whole story, you see a man who is defined by these two powerful forces that were all tangled up together: the raw physical courage of an explorer and the sharp, methodical mind of a scientist.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the man of action, the guy who climbs volcanoes, finds magnetic poles, and survives against all odds. And on the other, you've got the man of thought, the scientist who discovers minerals, maps coastlines, and lays the groundwork for his country's entire future in Antarctica.
And if you still need one more number to really grasp his dedication, it's this one, 22. After he got back from that hellish journey, what did he do? He spent years of his life personally editing and publishing 22 huge volumes of scientific reports from the expedition. The survival story was incredible, but for him, the science was the whole point.
In the end, this quote really says it all. The phenomenal courage is what makes his story so legendary, but it was his work as a very great scientist that gives that story its lasting meaning.
Which kinda leaves us with this one last big question. For a guy like Mawson, what was the bigger deal? The absolutely mind-blowing feat of surviving against impossible odds, or the decades of quiet, patient, methodical work that came after? Maybe the real answer is that for someone like him, you just can't have one without the other.